Kari, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. So we are going to jump right in today. We've got a lot of content to cover, and this should last right at about 30 minutes. We do try and leave time for Q&A in the event that the content takes a little bit longer and there are questions. I will make sure to put our email addresses up so anybody can reach out that wants to. Just very quickly, my name is Jen Davis. I'm a MAPS coach. I'm also the vice president of MAPS coaching. And I have the heart of a buyer's agent. So the number one thing that drives me is making sure that our buyer agents have a voice, that our buyer agents know what their value is, know how to communicate it, and that we get to help you sell a lot of houses in a super fun way. So Kari, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you. I know that you and I are very similarly, we've got the very similar goals in all of this, which is to help as many buyers agents as we can.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everybody. I am Kari Wyrsch. I am out of Springfield, Missouri. I am the lead buyer's agent for Grady Real Estate. I run the showing partner model very well. In the past 5 years, I've sold a little bit over 1,200 buyers. I mean, we've basically ramped up and we've been really consistent, and we love our people. We love our buyers.
Awesome. So clearly there's been a lot in the news over the last week or so, and I think Kari and I would be remiss not to mention it. There is a Keller Williams open house. Carlos, if you would pop that in the chat, where Gary and Jay and Jason and Mark Willis are going to go over a lot of the details surrounding it on Monday. So please join us then. If you have a question about today's content, my email address is up there, Kari's is up there. If you have any administrative questions, getting the recording, wanting some more information like Madeline said about other programs or this program, the email for that would be fasttrack@kw.com. Recordings typically will come out about 24 hours or so, 48 hours maybe at the most after the completion of the course. So, Kari, let's jump in. Let's talk about this. I think one of the things that you and I spend a lot of time thinking about is how do we show the value in any market of a buyer's agent? And I think it starts with getting hired, right? Every time.
Every
So
time.
talk to me about the don't be a Pop-Tart.
Well, I think that, first of all, I always say that no matter what, we always need to have a strategy session, right? We need to always meet with people in person to find out their wants and needs analysis, because sometimes if we go and we show a property, oftentimes what we're saying at the very end of the showing, if they're not making an offer, we're saying, gosh, I really feel like I missed out on really understanding what it is exactly that you're looking for. Because if we would have met and you would have told me your wants, your needs, your wishes, and then also all of your do not wants, I never would have shown you this house. I never would have wasted your time. I never would have wasted, the seller's time, the agent's time, everything else. So, oftentimes whenever we skip a step, we are causing more stress and trust, which I know what you talked about, last week was building buyer trust. And every time that you show a property that they don't feel comfortable with writing an offer, you're losing trust with them. So we've got to slow down the process, which ultimately speeds it up, because we are setting expectations with our buyers on what the process looks like so that it can be a successful customer experience at the end of the day.
Mhm. And I think there's something to be said, when we joke about not being a Pop-Tart, it was Tammy Vickers that first said that to me, and I laughed about it, and I still laugh every time I say it. But the idea of somebody calling in and wanting to see one house or two houses and us popping and running, right? Popping a lockbox, being a Pop-Tart, those days are really need to be over, right? Like we've got to start making the adjustments now. And so what Kari and I's goals are in this free training today and in Mega Buyer Agent when we teach that is we want to coach you guys to best practice, not common practice. Common practice is for somebody to call and say, hey, I want to see 123 Main Street. And for us to say, okay, I can be there in 30 minutes. That's common practice, right? The thought process of I'll show them one house, I'll get in front of them, I'll build rapport, and then they're going to work with me. That's not best practice though. Kari and I, we were in a session at Family Reunion, and I asked the question, how many of you get a buyer agency agreement signed? Or how many of you are uncomfortable getting one signed? And there was about 95% of the room that raised their hand that they're not comfortable getting one signed. And so when we go through exceeding buyer expectations today, it's because we know that if we show enough value in the strategy session, they sign it every time because they see your value. You're demonstrating that value. And then Kari, I had to pop your line on here because it's my favorite thing that you say. So talk us through the difference between a professional, not a being a professional and not a pleaser.
Well, I mean, we're not yes sirs. And I think that the big thing is whenever you, or yes ma'ams, yes sirs, but whenever you're releasing all of your control and you're putting that buyer in the driver's seat, and then what you're going to find is that you will never win. You will never win. Once you're under contract, they're still in the driver's seat, and you've got your systems and processes put in place for a reason because you know that they work, and you're there to be their professional. We are in a professional market, right? And we've been in a skill set market. We've been in a buyer's market, a seller's market, all of those things. This is a professional market and we need to act like professionals. And when you go and you're saying, yes, I'll do this. Yes, I'll list your property for your price. You're being a pleaser, right? You're not doing what's best for the client. You're not educating them. You're not teaching them. You're allowing them to run the show. And then whenever we get to the end and like there's so much friction towards the end, you always make the comment of, if I don't want to ask somebody for a review, there's probably a reason why. Well, that's because you've been a pleaser and you haven't been a professional. And so I think that just really understanding like your value and making sure that they understand your value, that you are a professional, and that's the reason why they want to work with you.
That's right. And I think when we look at like exceeding those expectations, right? When you and I talk and we say, okay, what are those key points in a strategy session, right? Because to set yourself up to be a professional, you have to start as a professional, right? We need to meet. Whether you guys want to meet on Zoom or you want to meet in person or you want to do a phone strategy session. I think Kari and I both really love an in-person strategy session. And that's us and that's our market. And we also understand that some of you are in big metro areas where maybe the drive time may not allow that. What we've got to look at though is the buyer is hiring you to work on their behalf. So when I look at this, it's the idea of how do I set myself apart, right? What am I doing that would cause someone to hire me instead of hiring an average agent? What would cause someone to hire me and be confident in paying me for my value, regardless of what the seller is offering, right? How do I have to show up to this strategy session to prove my value? And so we have to go into it as a professional. Part of that is being able to explain how you, the buyer agent, get paid. So when we look at that, the number one thing that you each can do is role play it. Explain buyer agency, explain how you get paid, explain how the commissions work. When there's transparency, people feel confident in it. And when they feel confident in it, they can make a decision, right? So when we look at we're decision facilitators, right? We don't make decisions for people, but we help facilitate the decision. And so one of the ways that we do that is being able to articulate our value, but also articulate how you get paid and who pays it. And I think that is a skill level where we used to look at role plays and dialogues around overcoming objections. We simply need to role play what our value proposition is, how we work for someone, and why they should hire us. And then Kari, you and I know that you go through really setting expectations even all the way through on how do you select their homes? How do you show homes? Talk us through that and kind of those key people that are in the process.
Well, I think that we're setting the entire purchase process up for success, right? That's the whole point of the strategy session. Expectation management, telling them when we go and look at properties, this is what this process looks like. If we walk in and it smells bad, we can leave. Giving them permission to tell you the things that they love or the things that they don't love. And, kind of explaining that we're not on TV. I realize that everybody watches HTV and they go through the entire house and everything else. We don't have to do that. And it's okay, right? Some people feel like, well, if I came and looked at, I took the time and the seller left and we have to spend an hour in the house. I think that that's a big misconception. The pass for us because we run the showing partner model happens during the strategy session. I am pointing out who the key people are going to be in their purchase so that they don't have a surprise whenever Bo, my showing partner, buyer's agent, whatever you want to call it, is reaching out to them within 24 hours and saying, hey, this is Bo. I know that you met with Kari and I'm so excited to help you with this process. You know, what are the times that you're available to go look at these two homes? They're expecting that phone call, right? When we go under contract and we call them and give them all the exciting news and we're saying, here's what's going to happen next. But whenever Courtney is giving them the call, they're expecting to hear from Courtney, right? It's set at the very, very front. And so they know exactly who and when, at what time each person is going to be reaching out to them. And just setting that expectation. We're also talking about the market. And I think that's super important. You know, it's sometimes a short snippet because when they come and they meet with me and they're meeting with the strategy session, I already know their parameters, right? I already know their price point. I already know some of those things, location, if it's a school district. So whenever I go and I meet with them, I'm able to have a really good education about the current market. If we're in multiple offers, what that looks like, right? We're finding out what the buyer's communication is. I think that this is a huge miss. You know, I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, this person's ghosting me. They're ghosting me. They won't answer my calls. They won't answer my texts. Well, come to find out, they can't answer their phone before 5 o'clock. Like they have a very, very, you know, strict policy that they cannot be on their phones. And so not knowing that they can't answer their phones before 5 o'clock or until after 5 o'clock, I think is sometimes a huge miss. And then we all of a sudden create stories in our head that these person's ghosting us or whatever. But, you know, do they want email? Do they want text? Do they want to be on, you know, a thread together with the decision makers? What is that best way of communication?
Well, I love that you brought that up because I also look at it, you know, I feel like as I'm getting older, the other agents are getting younger, right? And so it's all like DMs or text messages or those types of things, which I love a text message. I appreciate those. But there is something like for me, if I were a buyer, where there are certain conversations I would want to have on the phone, right? Or I would want to, if it was super detailed, I might prefer an email, right? Because a text message can get lost. And I think it's understanding that just our preferred messaging isn't their preferred messaging. And so I love the fact that you brought it up. Like we've got to ask them, what do they want? How do they want to hear from us?
Right. The other thing that I'm really thorough about is, you know, what we have access to, right?
Mhm.
Making sure that they understand that anything that's on the MLS, I have access to. You do not need to be calling any other agent. I am your agent. I am working for you. I'm loyal to you. You're loyal to me, right? Um, Open houses, you know, do they need to give their information? No, they need to give my information because they were going to contact me, right? Just these little things. We
Yep.
go over for sale by owners. We talk about shadow inventory. We let them know about our agent to agent inventory that we are constantly digging for. Um, Anything on that you want to touch on?
Well, I think like shadow inventory is what some people might call like a pocket listing, which I don't think you're really necessarily supposed to use that term, but it's the extras that you're willing to do. I think it's in a later slide where we kind of go through, you know, how do we communicate things to buyers to help communicate our value. Part of it is while we're in the in the strategy session is just saying, we make all of these extra calls. We're not simply looking at the MLS. We are going to look at all of these things. We're going to find you the best house, the best price, and the time frame that works best for you. So, you know, I also think we go through, you know, I know Kari, you and I both feel really confident in that the perfect offer starts in the strategy session, right? So we're setting ourselves up for negotiating a strong contract when we first meet with them. When we first meet with a client, we talk about market conditions. We're going to talk about the offer process. We're going to talk about, are they in multiple offers? Do they need to do an escalation clause? What's going to be required of them? Because if we wait until they find the house and emotions are involved, they're not prepared to make a logical decision on what they actually are comfortable with. And that's where buyer's remorse comes in. We've got to give them, we've got to start preparing them to write an offer before they've even looked at a house. And then talking about closing costs, right? What are the seller concessions? Are there, are the sellers going to be willing to pay it in that price bracket? Or is it something that they would be required to pay, right? Are the sellers not going to negotiate on that? How much are those? In addition to their down payment, what else can they expect? When we set them up and we're very clear on the information, I said it earlier, more information gives them confidence. Confidence helps them make a better decision, which reduces that friction point later that Carrie was talking about.
Yeah, and I think that another thing with the closing costs, it's probably the number one thing that when you meet with somebody face to face and they're like, I have this as a down payment. And you say, great. Did your lender discuss the closing costs? What are closing costs? Right? It's very often missed. And so then it's kind of like, not everybody has 3% plus 6% or 10% plus, or whatever that is.
The down payment money, the 3% down payment or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not everybody has that, plus their closing costs, just sitting in an account. So making sure that they understand that there is some additional closing costs for their loan.
Mhm.
The other thing I think is super important is like when you're meeting face to face, you can pull up on your screen and say, hey, I realize that you're approved for X amount, but what do you want your monthly payment to be? Because that's all that matters, right? I always tell people, I don't care if you're approved for $1 million. If you want your payment to be $1,200 a month, we need to change our parameters. And I don't want to be showing properties and then we get back to the table to write an offer and I pull up the numbers and they're like, what? Right? So I think that's a huge one. I think that's super, super big.
I think so too. And I think the fact that you're hitting it early on, my MAPS coach, and you're friends with him too, says often hard conversations, easy life, easy conversations, hard life. It's hard to bring up monthly payments when you first meet with someone. It's hard to bring that up. But what happens is then they have that knowledge, right? And you never then take them into a house that they're not going to be comfortable purchasing. You're never setting them up to have that embarrassment factor of, oh, wait a second, I am qualified up to $1 million, but I don't feel comfortable with that because of X, Y, and Z, right? Like that's embarrassing to pull that back later for people. And so the way that Carrie does it, I think everyone can learn from is have those conversations. We're not word vomiting on them. Like we are going through this quickly because we only have a short amount of time together. But when you're in that strategy session, it's slowing it down, right? Carrie said it earlier, you slow it down to speed it up. If you slow it down in the strategy session, guess what happens? When they find a house that fits the price range that matches the monthly payment they're comfortable with, they move that much faster. They're ready to go.
Yeah. It's all just makes everything very, very clear, and clarity is power. And I think that it's giving them a lot of power to know that whenever we walk in, we're walking in with confidence.
Mhm. Mhm. And then going through when we also, you and I both address inspections. What can they expect from an inspection? What does the report look like? What can we ask for? What can't we ask for, right? What are when we make the offer, what are our expectations? And a lot of that depends on those market conditions. Are sellers willing to negotiate in your market right now on repairs or not? Letting them know that up front may cause them to slow down a little bit in the showings, but again, it increases buyer satisfaction later. And then Carrie, I know that you guys have a really in-depth kind of contract to close process with this 83-point checklist. That's something that gives the buyers confidence because they can see the detail and the value that you and your team provide.
Yeah, and I've seen these, I mean, this is something that like anybody can make where it's just, I've seen them 90 points, I've seen them 80 points, I've seen them 50 points, but it's just an extra value add of what you're going to be doing from them from contract to close, right? We aren't door openers. We actually are professionals. And so it's showing our value.
And I think sometimes those visuals, those extra steps like that, it's an underscore of the value. You're not saying, woohoo, look at me, look at all the things I'm doing. It's you're actually handing them something that they can look at that they maybe didn't know, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Awesome. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're setting everybody up, right? We're
Yeah.
setting everybody up to win. And we listed out, we're setting up the buyer to win. We want to set up you as the agent to win anybody that's on your team, right? Anybody that's involved, we want them to feel like it's a win, right? We're in the business of people and we want to make sure that it feels good, right? If you look at the Y4C2Ts for KW, the first one is win-win. It's making sure everybody wins. And then we want to make sure that all of our preferred vendor partners also get to win. It's the lender that the buyer is working with, the inspection company, and the title company. We look at it, kind of the idea of together everyone achieves more, right? Like that's the teamwork in it.
I think that's so good too, because, by setting that up, I mean, I always have people come in and they'll like bring their pre-approval. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this lender. Like they're so good. You're going to love how efficient they are and their communication, and just making sure that they understand and they feel good about the decisions that that they've made with their lenders, with their inspections, with their title company or escrows, like whatever attorneys, like whoever you use. But it's making the experience fun so that at the end, it's all high fives and hugs.
Well, and I think Carrie, what you just said, just to underscore it, what she just said is she's giving third-party validation to people the buyer already chose, right? If the buyer chose that lender, or she's giving a third-party validation to companies that she already works with and has vetted and knows that they do a good job. People want to look good and be right. And so when Carrie says, oh my gosh, I love that lender. Number one, the buyer thinks to themselves, I'm so smart, right? Like it is internally, it's that voice of like, Carrie thinks I'm smart. I picked well.
Yeah.
You can't do those. Those are the little things. Those are the things that don't cost you any extra money. All it is just an inflection. It's making it fun for everyone. So this is one of our favorite lines of here's what happens next, right? This is what happens next. And it's getting them to understand we know that we sell a lot of houses. And there are some of you on the screen that you're like, I'm a brand new buyer's agent and I've never sold a house. Learn from Carrie and I's mistakes, right? This is something that we learned over the years that we take for granted. We have the curse of knowledge. We know what we know. We know what happens next. And so sometimes what we have to do is we have to learn a phrase that causes us to slow down. So Carrie, how often do you think that you say, this is what happens next, or here's what happens next?
I always prompt it for the end of every showing, the end of every phone call, the end of every time I'm on a call or in a meeting. This is what I'm going to do next. Finish a strategy session. This is what you're going to expect. Bo will be reaching out to you in the next 24 hours. I'm going to set up your search on your buyer instant notification system. When you go under contract, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. All the fun things that you get to talk about. This is what's going to happen next. Courtney's going to be reaching out to you on Monday morning, and we're going to start processing your file, right? At the end of the inspection, this is what's going to happen next. This is a negotiation. We are going to provide this list. It's every single time, even down to, this is what's going to happen next. I'm going to send you the contact information for city utilities. You need to switch over your trash service. You need to bring a cashier's check made out to this company, right? We're setting them up for success at the closing table as well. I mean, it's all the way through the process.
Well, and I think what you just talked about is being a fiduciary, right? Instead of a functionary. When you look at the difference between the two, a functionary is someone that opens doors. They're licensed, they can open doors, and they do typically, not all of the extra steps. What Carrie is saying is, I'm taking the extra step. I am the professional. I am going to make sure that I eliminate as much friction as I can from the beginning to the end. And that's the goal. That's how we exceed buyer expectations every time. Because if Carrie says, this is what happens next, it might be, guys, there's not much, right? Through the inspection, we've got the appraisal, we've got 2 weeks until closing. It's going to get really quiet. And just know that I'm here. I'm a phone call away. If there's something that all of a sudden you think of, let me know, reach out anytime. It's still here's what happens next, even if there's nothing that's going to happen. And what Carrie typically will do, and great buyers agents will do, is they'll almost under promise and over deliver. So Carrie may say, you may not hear from me, for a week to 10 days because there's really nothing happening. And yet then what Carrie might do is call them in 3 or 4 days and say, hey, just making sure you're okay. Right? Anything you need and anything pop up. Do you have any questions? Because what's happening is she's demonstrating that value of, I'm your partner in this, right? I get to walk you through this. And I think that the misunderstanding sometimes is it's an honor to be people's buyer's agents. It's an honor to get to walk alongside them on the pathway to homeownership. And when we act like it's an honor, we show up different and we provide different value.
Mhm. I love that.
And we talked about that was kind of the non-update update, right? There are times where I might call a buyer on a Friday, and I may say, "Hey, Kari, it's Jen. I know that we've been looking and we're hoping, we're looking for that specific house in Eagles Gate subdivision, and we're waiting for it to come up, and I haven't seen anything come up yet. Just so you know, though, my team and I spent the day making phone calls in a TCPA friendly way, making phone calls and reaching out to see if there's anybody that's getting ready to sell their property. As soon as I hear back from some of them, I'll give you an update." So I'm not saying to Kari, I've got a house to show you. I am telling Kari in a certain way of, I'm still working for you. I'm doing all of these extra things that you need for me to do.
I think that this is the biggest miss that agents don't do, right? We don't have an update, so we don't make a phone call. And what we do is wrong because I call it stories, right? People create stories. If you're not telling your story, someone's creating a story for you. And so, I mean, how many times have we had a situation where we thought something happened and then we found out what it really was? So I think it's really important that if you are making those phone calls, you're letting them know, because otherwise you will hear, "Well, I didn't think you were doing anything for me, so I found the property by myself." And you're like, "Well, actually, I spent the entire day calling, you know, old expireds or canceled listings." But if you don't tell them, they don't know.
They don't know. And if you tell them after they say, "Well, I found the house on my own," then it seems like an excuse. It's the proactive non-update update, right? Like making sure that they know what you're doing. So Kari, you put this in our notes. So I loved it, right? Like the number one job that we have is managing expectations, right? That should be, you also put it was the goal, right? The goal is to correctly manage expectations. I was on a coaching call this morning with one of my MAPS clients, and I said, where resentment happens or disappointment happens is the difference between what the expectation was that was set,
Mhm.
whether actually being set or not set, right? If somebody thought it or was what they heard, but the difference between the expectations and the reality, that's where disappointment comes in or resentment comes in or frustration comes in. And I think it's a really good life lesson, right? I think our number one job in all things is expectation management.
Absolutely. It just makes the process a little bit better. And there's nothing better than getting to the closing table with somebody and they're so happy. And it's like, "How was your experience?" And they were like, "Everything you said and exactly the way that you did." It's like you predicted it, right? And they
Yeah.
were like, "It's just a really easy, smooth process because I knew what to expect the entire time." You will hear that.
Mhm. I think I think it's so fun, right? Like what we do is so fun. And so I want everybody that's on this screen or listens to the recording later to understand we're going to be good. All of the changes that are happening, we're going to navigate them. We're going to help you get through it. We're going to coach around it. I did see a couple of comments in the chat. One was when we were talking about some additional things like for sale by owners and those, somebody said wholesale inventory. I love that. That's awesome. And then Kari, somebody mentioned the 83-point checklist. Is there a way for us to give access to that? I know we have it in our mega buyer agent class, yet there's likely a way that maybe we could send it out with the, I don't know if we can send it, we could figure out a way to send it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you registered, and we're just going to assume you want it and we'll send it to you. We are launching a new round of Mega Buyer Agent on April 11th. We are really looking forward to this round. We we know that there are a lot of changes, and Kari and I are adjusting content. We're adjusting some messaging to make sure that it is all at the top of what needs to be happening right now. So if you want to spend 6 weeks with Kari and I, we would love to have you. If not, that's okay too. We hope that you gained some great value from today. I know I always get to learn something when I get to share with Kari. So super happy to get to see you today.
It was super fun.
Awesome, everybody. Have a great day. Don't forget to come to the open house town hall meeting thing Monday at 11 a.m. Central Time. The link is in the chat. It also likely has been emailed to your account. So hope you guys have a great day. We'll see you soon.